Well, welcome to the 12th and final part of the shoot 'em up done in Monogame, Pygame and Love2D, and we're now doing the Monogame version. So all the code is available now on my GitHub repository, so I'll put the link in the description below. So let's move on to Monogame and see what happens. So as before, we get the menu, but I wanted to show you today was the leaderboard, which you would normally do by playing the game, and then when you lose all 3 lives you get to the leaderboard. In order to enable some debugging and get to it quickly, if I press X to get debug mode followed by L, I immediately go to the leaderboard. So you'll see how it works. We've got this list of 5 names and their scores, and then down here the ability to type in a name and then press enter. So if I type in, say, test, I can delete by pressing the backspace key, and we'll put the rest of it in, and then when I'm ready I press enter. It's asking for C to continue, and then we begin. So that's how the menu works there with the leaderboard. So we'll look at the leaderboard now, and you'll see that this is a full class, even though we only need 1 leaderboard. And one of the reasons for that is that we've now got within it a nested class, which is not that commonly used in C# or any of the languages particularly, but can be quite useful. So we've got our internal class leaderboard here, and within it there's this small class called score data. Now there's a summary of what this is all about here and why have we got a subclass. The reason being that we want to be able to hold an integer value score and a string value name in a very, very small object, and then we can store that names score combo in some kind of list that will allow us to display it and read it and write it to files. So within this this internal sort of private class, it's only available to the leaderboard. It's not available to the rest of the project. So we've got a double constructor. So this is first constructor, where we are passing in a single line string. Then we've got a second constructor, which is therefore overloading. So this is called overloading in C#, where you can pass in different parameters. So as long as these 2 are different, then you can have 2 or more constructors, which you'll see quite a lot in C# objects that you're using every time you use it, but you may not realize you can program your own in, and this is how it's done. So we can either pass in a string or on its own, or a string along with a score. So it will deal with those differently, so we'll come back to that in a minute. There's also 2 methods, one of which is private, so that's decode line, which is done inside the class, and one of them is public, so that we can get out of it the data that we've put in one of 2 formats. So if we wanted to display the high score, as we did on that screen I showed you just a moment ago, we're going to return it as the name space colon space and then the score. Whereas if we're going to save it to a file, we want it in this format where we've got name, which is in quotes. Actually, that's I didn't kind of make that clear here, but it doesn't matter because this is a string that we'll be writing to a file. So we've got Fred semicolon score and then the \n, which is of course is the new line character. So that's how we would write this line to a file, and that's how we print it to the screen. So depending on whether we put in as in the parameter either file or leave it to something else, or leave it, you'd have to put something in. Even an empty string would do fine, or if you put display, for example, then you're going to get that. So that's how this sort of inner class works. So we'll just close that down for a second. Now on the main constructor we've only got one, so leaderboard is there, and it just says populate the score list. So as soon as we lose our 3 lives and die, the game state changes to leaderboard, and the leaderboard is started up, so it then starts to do its job. So first thing to do is to populate the score list. So let's go to that one. So we've got this list here, which we clear to make sure that it's empty. Now that list, if I go back to the top, is a list of type score data. So we've got this class called score data, which will produce objects for us that contain 2 components, a score and a name. And this list is going to make a list of score data objects. So that's what this one is all about up here. So with our populate score list, we first of all clear that list if it's got anything in it. We're then checking whether the file highscore.txt exists. Now this of course would be in the bin folder of the output, but it looks very much like the Python version, which is here. So you've got this simple list of names and semicolon and a score. So that's the text file that is read in. So this the highscore.txt will be in the bin file of so it's in the same folder as the executable for this game. If you wanted to put it elsewhere, you can easily use the file and path IO from the IO class, which is here, system IO, to put it wherever you like. But this is just at the moment being dumped straight into the same folder as the executable. So if that file exists, then we're going to read from it into this string array called lines, and then for each of the lines in the file we're going to go through them and you call this add score data for each line. So let's see what add score data does. Now what this does is from the line that we supply it, which will have just two pieces of information in it, the name and the score, is going to create a new score data temporary variable by calling a new score data and passing in the line. So that will then go to this class here. We're passing in a line which consists of just a string, so it's going to go to the decode line, which is where it will split that string. For example, Fred : 258 is then split into 2 parts, so you'll get Fred as one part and the score 258 as another, both in string format, of course. So we are splitting it into 2 parts and then trimming off any excess spaces so that we've literally got Fred and 258 without any surrounding spaces. Next, what we're doing is we want to populate the score variable, which by default will be 0, although it's been declared up here and not assigned a value. It's given a default value of 0, so score is 0. Now this is something unique to C#, the try pass. So what we're saying here is, can you get please an integer by trying to parse it, trying to extract it from whatever string I feed you. So parts bracket 1 trim would be the number that we passed as a string from our line if it was here. So that's in string format. We want to convert it to an integer. So try pass, if it succeeds, will send the value of the try pass to this out variable here, which we've already defined as score. So if it succeeds, score will then contain whatever was in here. If it doesn't succeed, then there's no error, it will just remain at 0 because score hasn't been changed. So this returns a Boolean value. So you can, if you want to, you could put if int try pass and then carry out some code if the pass was successful, or if not try pass, then again carry out some code like you entered the wrong data. Anyway, this is extremely useful, and it does prevent errors occurring if, for example, the text file got corrupted or interfered with and there was no number that it could extract from it. So this then produces our two properties, which is name and score. I suppose what I should have done is, rather than just leaving as public ints, I should have put them as properties. So let's do that now. And as you can see, using Visual Studio 2022, it's got this built-in artificial intelligence, and it's kind of guessing that's what I want to do. So we can do that, and the same with the name tab, job done. So that's just tidied that up a little bit. So we've now got some proper properties, getters and setters in there. Now let's come back to where we were. So we were trying to read in our data. So it's going to make one of these from our internal class here. It will make a score data object and then insert that data into it's going to call this function insert data and passing through our new score data. Now of course I could have done this all in one line. I could have put insert data new score data line, which is perfectly okay. I've done it deliberately in two sections to help those who are still learning some of the more obscure things that you can do with C#. So that could easily have been combined. So insert data, and then instead of creating this score temp variable, just put that in straight into here, which would have done the same job. Let's look at insert data. Here it is, right, insert data. So what this wants to do is to, we've got this this list called score list. We want to make sure that the highest score is the first one in the list and the lowest score is the last one. So we're going to assume that the place to insert our new score is at the end of the list, okay, which is the list count. So if there are 5 members in it, it's going to be inserting it at number 5. Then we're going to check through whether go through each of the members of the current score list one by one in this loop and check whether the current new score data is greater than or equal to the current list item that we're looking at. So if it is greater than, then we're going to change this insert at from the kind of end of the list to whatever the value of I is. So if we've just passed in the best score so far, it's going to make insert at would be 0 because I starts at 0. So we're going to put it in at 0 if it's the best score so far. If not, it'll go through whatever the list is, and then of course if we've got a new place, we break the loop, we've found its position. And then finally, once we've gone through the loop to find out where it should go, is we're going to use the list insert function here, and we're going to insert at that value that we have already discovered and then pass in the data. So that will always make sure that our score list is always sorted in a top score value downwards. So that's inserting the data there. And then once that's done, then the that function has finished, and we're then relying on update. Yeah, that's all done. We've inserted the data, so we're now relying on the update and draw to continue with the rest. Update will only be checking whether the player has entered their name, and if that's not the case, then we can just draw the leaderboard out as we were before. So this bit draws the leaderboard. In fact, let me just display that again so that you can see. Oops, I must have done something silly. Let's just run the last version. Right, so let's press X to debug and L for leaderboard. So the draw one here, this line 149, draws leaderboard using size 50 text at the position half the width and position of 0, color yellow and aligned in the center, so that draws that. Then we're setting the Y position to 80, which is just here, and then we're going through our loop of a loop of all the items in our score list. We're checking for the max lines, which has been set to 5, so that we only display 5 lines. So as long as it's less than 5 or less than or equal to 5, then it will display these. And then we're drawing the string that has the score list get score data for the display, which will pass back from our class or from our object get store data. It will pass back that pre-formatted string that I was showing you earlier to give like the name colon score in the sizes and these widths and places. Once it's drawn those, if the current player has been entered, then it's going to draw press C to continue down here somewhere. Otherwise, it's going to draw type your name and press enter, and this display box, which is part of the shared class. So let me just show you the shared class briefly. So we've now got this new display box function. I've put it in shared so that it could be used elsewhere, and it basically just draws the background rectangle, the outline rectangle, and the text that you want to draw in it. So that's the display box in its working there. Let's go back to the leaderboard. So that draws it there. So when the user are typing in your name, it's not using the update function in leaderboard. It's using the text input handler as it is for the menu. So if you recall last episode, we were using the text input handler for the menu to check whether the keys pressed were the enter key or the B key to turn the music on or off. I've added, I think the X key was there to change debug on and off. I've added this one. So if the L key is pressed and you're in debug mode, it'll then switch straight to leaderboard. So that was the way I got to the leaderboard. If we're already in the leaderboard, then we're checking whether keys back is being pressed or keys enter, and carrying out whether we're deleting a character or just adding the new entry to the leaderboard, or just increasing the size of the shared input text. And then if we're increasing the shared input text as I'm typing in, that input text is growing via a character to string to upper every time we press a key. So that's how that function works there. So this is outside, this is in the main class, and it's using the text input handler which is an event handler that fires when we press a key. So we'd already kind of gone over that last time with the menu. So coming back to the leaderboard, so this one only deals with the C key, because what we're checking is if the current player is entered, then we know that we're just waiting for that C key, so there's no need to kind of get all this information from the main file. So there's two ways of doing it. This works very well using a combination of both, but you could do it all in one. We could look again for this back in the main file there. Okay, so once that's been entered, the C key shows up. Once you press the C key, it sets the game state to menu. Says current players entered equals false, gets rid of the input text back to what it was before, and then you're ready to play a new game. The only other difference I can think of is in the main one here, is when we are, I think it's under custom methods, yeah, is when we are being hit by a mob. So that's the bullet ones. Yeah, when we are hit by a mob, on this line here it was saying shared game state equals game states menu, and taking us back to the menu. Just by changing that to leaderboard, then takes us back to the leaderboard instead of a menu. So it's as simple as that, just changing what happens when a game state is chosen. The only new things in the variables is we've got a private leaderboard here, leaderboard class, leaderboard variable, and then down in the load or content load, I think it is, it's inherited procedures, yeah, load content, there we are, leaderboard equals new leaderboard. So we're creating the new leaderboard function at that point, but we're not actually doing anything with it at that stage, because our game state is still not leaderboard. So although we've created it, and things might be going on behind the scenes, it's kind of ignoring it because we haven't chosen that in our game state. So in the updates one, we update the leaderboard if the game state is leaderboard, and in the draw function again, if the game state is leaderboard here, we're calling leaderboard draw. So that's just bolted onto the bottom of that. Shared debug remains the same. So that pretty much covers the use of the leaderboard, and it is much more complicated, the fact that we're getting text input from what appears to be multiple sources, but they're fairly heavily commented. Certainly go through it with a stop action so you can kind of see what happens when things are when events happen, and it should then become fairly straightforward. So for example, if I where are we, if we go to the constructor for the leaderboard, where are we? Oh, here it is, leaderboard. So what we'll do is put a stop point in there, and we'll fire it up. Oh, I've forgotten about that. So yeah, okay, let me fix that and I'll come back. Okay, I found the error. It's underlining this try pass out score, and the error reads, a property or indexer may not be passed as an out or ref parameter. Now what that means is the fact that I've got it as an out used to work beautifully, but if you remember, I changed this from just a public integer into a getter setter thing. So if I delete that and just put it back as public int score, hopefully that will work. So what I wanted to do was to get to this point, so let's try that again. Okay, so we're already got to this populate score list, so let's go through. We'll press F11. So this is what we were saying, that we're now going to carry out the populate score list functions. So the first job is to clear the score list. Now we're looking to see whether the file exists, which I know it does, and then we're going to use read all lines of the high score text, and that will be placed now in our array, string array lines. So if I click on the arrow, you'll see that we've got these lines here that we've got for our input file. We've got the boss 7000 and so on. So those are the lines that are in there. Now for each line that we're going to go through, it's first of all going to check the length. As you notice, some of those seem to be empty lines. So if we go through F11 again, if the line length is greater than 0, we're then going to add score data with the line, and the line that we're going to currently work on is the boss semicolon 7004. So we'll step through here, and it's now at this point here where it's going to add the score data. So there's the line, the boss 7004, score data, score temp. This is where we, as I said, we could have made it in one line, but we'll do it in two sections. So it's going to call the class now, the score data class. So we're now going to decode that line. So we're now inside the score data class, and we're going to decode the line which we sent in, which is the boss semicolon 7004. So again, we're splitting the line using the semicolon, and the parts now will contain the boss and 7004, both in string format. Then we go to F11, and then this is where we're out. This is the bit that was causing us the error a minute ago. So if I press F11, then we can see that score now contains 7004 because the try pass was successful, so score got the value, and of course the name has now got the boss, and that is now finished. So we have created a new score temp variable. If I press F11, so if we now look at score temp, you can see that it's designated as a shmup leaderboard score data, and if I click the down arrow, it shows me the name and the score inside that class, which is quite neat. So we're now going to insert it into the correct place, so we'll press F11 and F11 again. So inserter is going to be by default set at the score list.count, which if we press F11 is at 0, so we've got an empty score list at the moment. So it should therefore kind of skip this, because we haven't got enough elements in it to go whizzing through here. So if I press F11, it should drop straight out, which it has, because the loop won't run because we've got an empty score list. So obviously we're going to put it in at position 0, and we're going to put in that object which contains the boss at 7004. So of course this list is already sorted because it's being read in from a file in a ready sorted manner. So we press F11, and now our score list has got one item in it, which is one of these score datas, and if we click on it, it's got the name and the score there. So this will go through the entire list of names. So what we'll do is I'll put a red stop there, and we'll let it run through. So that's gone through Now score list should have, let's see what we've got in there. We've now got 2. Yeah, let's run it again. 3, 4, 5. So we should have score list. There's a count of 5, so we've got 5 objects in there, of which the final one is Mary at 3175. So that's our score list has been filled. So the insert data has run. So I think that for each line should finish now. Let's just check. Yep, we're done. So we've populated the score list, and that's now completed our leaderboard construction. So that shows you how that works. So I hope by stepping through the code like that, which is something I'm hoping you've already done many times, but it just shows you how you can check whether things are going as you expected them, and if not, what you can do about it. So if you ask me what is my favourite gaming library, I would have said Love2D Lua, but now that I've got into Monogame just by doing this series, so I'm not an experienced person with Monogame by any means. I'm already still watching online videos how to use it, but I really like Monogame, and I think it's got huge potential. So ask me again next year, but I think I might change from Love2D to this. It's really good. So enjoy your learning of gaming experience, and get what you can out of it.